Namaste, Sakshi, Telugu Prajala Manasakshi. Welcome to Special Immigration Show. Today we are back with our expert attorney, Bhanu B. Lindra Garu, BBA Law Group, PC. 17 years of experience in law offices. So if you need any specific legal advice and also you have any specific legal information, you can call to us and Bhanu Garu will be glad to answer your questions. So before we begin the show, please note that the information provided on this show not a legal advice, it's just for information purpose only. So Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for this. If you need any specific legal advice, please contact the attorney directly. And without any further delay, Bhanu garu unnaru maatladidam. Hello Bhanu garu, welcome to the show only. How are you?
Thank you, Prasanna garu. Thank you very much for inviting me again, and I'm doing good. Thank you, and yeah, thanks, ma'am. Thanks
Yes,
again
Bhanu garu.
once
So
again,
before
Sakshi
we get
TV.
into the topic, yes, can you please provide information on law offices and also practice areas?
Yeah, sure, ma'am. My name is Bhanu Ilindrani. I'm an immigration attorney. I exclusively practice in immigration law, and I've been practicing immigration law for 17 years in the US. And my firm name is BBA Law Group PC. Our office number is 703-496-7722. And our email ID is bhanu@bbalawgroup.com or contact at bbalawgroup.com or crm@bbalawgroup.com. We're located in Herndon, Virginia, Andy, which is a Washington, D.C. suburbs. And our firm website is www.bbalawgroup.com. As I said, we exclusively practice in immigration law. We represent in all types of immigration matters: family-based immigration, employment-based immigration, investor-based immigration, basically. There is not a single case which we don't do in immigration law. We represent in all across the matters in the country. Yeah.
Right. Thanks for the info, Bhanu garu. We have a first caller, Bhanu garu. Let's take the calls. And
Sure.
Mahesh from Maryland. Mahesh, please go on.
Hello, Bhanu garu.
Yes, Mahesh garu.
I have a question, Andy. Can I use H1B prior October 1st to let me put it this way. I'm working for employer A. My H1B got picked up for employer B, and if I would like to use that approved H1B before October 1st, is it still to do that? Is it okay or?
You cannot, your H1B doesn't come into effect until October 1, 2021. It may be approving prior to that, but it won't come into effect from October 1, 2021. You can only use that H1B from October 1, 2021. That means if you want to transfer to another employer, you can transfer that with effective date of October 1, 2021. But you cannot work pursuant to that prior to October 1, 2021, because it's a cap case.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thanks for calling. And Bhanu garu, mana topic loki velle mundu. So, do you have any latest updates on immigration?
Not much, Ali. Not much from the last week. Basically, the updates are what we have given last week. Basically, not too many updates. Only update we have is that the consulates in India are actually again shutting down. They are basically canceling the appointments also. Mumbai, especially Mumbai consulate, completely cancel all the appointments. They're only giving the emergency appointments only in Mumbai. They're not processing regular cases right now because of the spike in COVID-19 cases in Maharashtra and surrounding areas of Mumbai and everything. And we are expecting the similar kind of calls will be coming from Delhi and Kolkata and Chennai as well very soon, and Hyderabad as well very soon, basically. And so I think people should be psychologically be prepared that their appointments will be cancelled very soon until the situation comes into control in India again. And there are travel restrictions are very, very important. People to understand that if they're traveling to India through connecting flights through different countries, through Middle East or UK and US, UK and other countries, European countries, they have to be ready to do to make sure that they do the COVID-19 test. Although even if they're vaccinated, ensure that they do the COVID-19 test and update it in Air Suvidha portal website within 72 hours of the traveling date, basically, and make sure that if they're traveling to UK or some other countries, make sure that they follow their country's protocols also. That means if you're traveling to UK, you have to update and provide the information in the UK government website also about your COVID-19 test results and everything. And then once you land in UK and if you go to India, There are entirely different requirements for you people if you're traveling from UK and other countries. There are different restrictions for their people in India. Sometimes they can be subject to mandatory 7-day quarantine, especially if any co-passenger found that they found positive with the COVID-19 test pandemic and everything, basically. So that's one thing which they have to do. And also they have to be be ready to subject themselves to a COVID test once they land in the airports in India. And they have to wait those results to come on to leave the country and everything. And the same thing, US also, basically. US government also said that if you're fully vaccinated, basically, CDC came into and provided information on that, saying that if you're fully vaccinated, then what do they mean by fully vaccinated is basically certain vaccinations have 2 doses, dose 1 and dose 2. And then there's a 14-day incubation period after the second dose is completed. Once that 14-day period is met, after the second day vaccination is done, then it's called fully vaccinated. That's what the CDC said, basically. If you're fully vaccinated, US government does not require you to take any COVID-19 testing while you're traveling outside the country. But however, it depends upon the requirements of the countries, destination countries. If they if they're required to take a testing, you have to do it. But however, US government still requires you to do a testing, even though you are a full vaccinated, still requires you to do the testing and upload the negative test record prior to traveling to US from other countries. And those tests have to be taken within 72 hours. So people who are actually planning to travel to India through England or Middle East countries, they have to keep it aware that they may be subject to mandatory 7-day quarantine if they have a suspicion of at least one passenger in that flight basically is being tested positive or anything like that. So plan accordingly, and that's only the differences right now. And also, if you're going for a stamping right now, make sure that your appointment is still valid and still be intact. It is not cancelled, basically. So those are the 2 things, Andy, which I would tell you.
Right. Thanks for the info, Bhanu garu. So, on a topic which is the continuation topic to the last week episode, Andy. So, as we all know that H1B registrations and first lottery కూడా finish అయింది కదా. సో నెక్స్ట్ ఏం జరగబోతుంది అని మనం తెలుసుకుంటున్నాం లాస్ట్ 2 ఎపిసోడ్స్ నుంచి. సో భాను గారు, చాలా మందికి క్వశ్చన్ ఉంటుంది ఏంటి అంటే H1B 2020 రిజిస్ట్రేషన్ ప్రాసెస్ లాటరీ ఇస్ రియల్లీ లాటరీ ర్యాండమ్ ఆర్ నాట్ అని. సో కెన్ యూ ప్లీజ్?
Yeah. It is a random, Prasanna Garu, and but however, there's a criteria how they do the lottery, right? Basically, they're basically giving the preference to the master's degree, US master's degree graduates, basically who graduate the US master's degree or higher degree. They're giving preference to them in the beginning, but how they're giving the preference is they're taking the general quota lottery first, basically by everybody including lottery, that they're taking that first, basically. And whoever is not selected in that master's quota category people, then they're basically putting into the master's quota lottery and then taking in that way. So that's why that is only the preference which they've given in the current lottery basis. It's completely random. So we have seen very different results. Basically, overall, I think in our firm, we had around 28% of all the cases which we filed got selected in the lottery. And most of the cases we filed are basically for the advanced degree professionals from the US, basically. That means people who have a master's degree or higher degree from the accredited universities and the qualified institutions, basically. And most of the registrations are submitted by a firm for them, basically. Despite submitting for them, the percentage is very low in the selection of the cases overall, basically. And I think that's because of I think they might have received large number of registrations this year compared with the last year, basically, and it's completely random. I don't see any other question in that.
Okay, so what does the current process look like after H1B registrations rule has been introduced?
I didn't get your question, Andy. Can you repeat it one more time?
What does the current process look like after the H1B registration rule has been introduced?
Well, the current process has been the same as the last year, basically. Once the case had been selected in the lottery, they did notify them by email and also updating in the employers' accounts in the portal, basically government portal, where they actually submitted the registrations, basically. Make sure that those things are very, very important. And as I said in the past case, once that has happened, make sure that employers submit their petitions. They have to file the actual H1B petition with the USCIS. That means they have to prepare all the documents, Form I-129, Certified LCA, employer statement, and all of the supporting documents, which is required to seek an approval of H1B petition. They have to include all those documents basically together. along with appropriate fees, they have to file it with the USCIS, physical copy, physical petition. H1Bs cannot be submitted online. They have to be submitted physically only with the USCIS. So make sure that employers do submit those petitions within 90 days of the period, basically, because they have a validity period from April 1 to June 30th only. So these are all the cases that have been selected in the lottery. They have to file prior to June 30, 2021, with an effective start date of October 1, 2021. That has not been changed from the last year. It's continuing the same this year also, and the process will remain the same. And it's better to talk to an attorney, better hire an attorney in preparing your H1B cases, and make sure that attorneys help you in filing the case, everything, because they are well versed on what is required as per the law and everything. I'm not saying that one cannot file by themselves or by themselves. I mean, employers cannot file by themselves, but it's better to always seek an expert help and advice in preparing and filing these cases. That's what we will advise, basically.
Yes, definitely, Andy. So I have a small announcement, Bhanu Garu. So if someone need any specific legal advice or any legal immigration service, you can contact Bhanu Garu through email ID or phone number. I can tell you email ID and website వచ్చేసి www.bbalaw.group.com and also email ID bhanu@bbalaw.group.com and also phone number is 7034967722. He is always ready to help you guys. So you can text, call or email at www.bbalaw.group.com. థ్యాంక్ యూ. సో భాను గారు, మనం లాస్ట్ వీక్ కూడా మాట్లాడుకున్నాము. ప్రీవియస్ ఇయర్ లాగే ఇప్పుడు కూడా మనకి సెకండ్ లాటరీ, డూ వీ హ్యావ్ సెకండ్ లాటరీ ఛాన్స్?
Yes, I strongly believe yes. There's a very high likely and possibility that second lottery is going to be there, because I don't think all the employers will be submitting the entire cases, 85,000 required cases in this period of time, because most of the times employees can back out from the offers given to them, or employers' requirements might change. Something could happen, just like what happened in the last year. So I do not know whether we'll have the lottery in the volume of the second lottery, the volume as it has happened in the last year. But definitely, yes, there's going to be there's always a possibility that we'll have a second lottery. And I strongly believe there are high chances of possibility having a second lottery even this year also.
Okay. So Bhanu Garu, I have a question. So what is 221G regarding consulating your visa interview, right? So can you please provide information on this?
221G is basically a section in the Immigration Nationality Act. It's INA section 221G, which basically allows consulates to deny or reject somebody's visa application, basically. Okay. So if the Department of State, that is basically consulates abroad, when you apply for a visa abroad, if they feel like the person who's seeking a visa there did not provide all the enough information to actually award a visa to them, then basically they will be rejecting your visa pursuant to the authority given to them under INA section 221G. So basically, because of that section, basically they created this form, which is basically called 221G form, basically. And that's how in the general language we say 221G has been given. Basically, what does it mean is that under INA Immigration Nationality Act section 221G, somebody's visa has been rejected, basically. That's what it means.
Okay. So after selection in the lottery, when can we file I-129 petition, Bhanu Garu?
As I said, from April 1, 2021 to June 30, 2021. This is the period in between we have to file H1B petition, along with and the petition must state the start date of employment has to be October 1, 2021.
Okay. So what are the categories the H1 cap exempt process fall under?
Okay, there are the H1B cap exempt cases. See, people use this term in two situations, basically, in generally, normal. Our రెండు situations ఏంటంటే basically ఒకటి ఏంటంటే the entity which is actually filing a case qualifies for to hire an exempt employee, basically. It should be exempt employee. That means, what does it mean is basically is that they are not subject to the cap. I mean, they don't have to go through the lottery system. They don't have to go through the lottery or selection basis or regular cap quota and everything, basically. And certain institutions qualify for such exemption, basically. what are those entities, or basically usually are the institutions of higher education or uh, government research organizations, basically any research organizations, basically, or institution of higher education, or affiliated institutions with higher institution of higher education, they qualify for that. Usually, who are they? They're usually universities, okay, public schools, which are affiliated with the institution of higher educations, and any research entities. Basically, their primary purpose is conducting the research, basically applied research and those kind of research, which that is what the primary responsibility of the particular entity is. For example, uh, we will take an example. Let's, because we are in the COVID pandemic, let's take a Pfizer, basically, right? And Pfizer primary purpose is not conducting the research. Of course, research is a huge part for them. R&D is a huge part for them in developing their drug, but their primary purpose is not conducting research, basically. Their primary purpose is actually creating drugs, creating medications, basically, right? So we have to understand that. So the organizations that actually involve in the only research activities, they are the ones who qualify for this exemption, along with the institutions with the higher educations. For example, universities and the hospitals related with universities do qualify for these things, basically. Not every non-profit organization does not qualify for the exempt petitions, basically. That is one H-1B exempt employee means. And other circumstances where we call H-1B exempt, very simple situation is basically is that if somebody already got selected in the lottery and they file an H-1B petition in the lottery, and that H-1B petition has been approved for them in the lottery, then they do not have to subject to themselves again into the lottery. And they're called cap exempt employees, basically because they're not subject to the cap anymore until they complete the 6-year duration on the H-1B petition, basically. So they are the ones, under people whom use an exempt employees. You have to understand there are this exempt term is used in different ways in different situations, basically. I don't want to complicate to you, basically talking about the H-1B dependent employer, H-1B dependent exempt and everything there, basically, because there we use the word H-1B dependent exempt also. That's entirely a different thing. But that is not related, I think, with the question what you asked, basically. But what does it mean is basically, these are the two different things which we are talking about. The what do you mean by H-1B exempt employee means, this is what it means, basically.
Okay. So, Bhanugar, what is DS-160? I mean, can I have some knowledge on this?
Sure, ma'am. DS-160 is basically non-immigrant visa application, which basically, when you are trying to apply for a visa abroad at the consulate, whether it's a B1 visa, whether it's an H1 visa, whether it's an F1 visa or L1 visa or O1 visa, whichever non-immigrant visa you are trying to apply at the consulate abroad, then you have to fill an application form for a visa, and that application form is actually form DS-160. Basically.
Okay, right. So, Bhanugaru, I mean, what is the H-1B 2020 lottery predictions?
I mean, 2021, you're talking about this year predictions.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, now it's actually fiscal year 2022, which is taken in 2021. The predictions is basically already we have seen how many people cases have been selected and everything. But what I'm predicting is basically is that I'm going to see surge in issuing RFEs for specialty occupation, basically. Because they cannot issue a RFE on itinerary requirements or a right to control issues, basically, because courts have ruled them that they're against the law. So we are going to see surge in the issuance of specialty occupation, basically, because the reason why I would say that is basically is that Defensa versus Meisner, which is a Fifth Circuit case, is basically adapted as a precedent decision in 2009. And since then, that case law still governs on how they adjudicate H-1B petitions. Even though you're not required to provide an itinerary, you're not required to provide documentation about your right to control your employee, basically. Still, you have to establish that you have a bona fide employer-employee relationship for the purpose of seeking an H-1B petition. And also the position must qualify for specialty occupation, especially when the employee works at the third-party client side where you do not have a direct responsibility on the employee. Then how do you show that the position actually where the employee is working is a specialty occupation? And for that, Defensa versus Meisner is the case law which governs, and the US still follows that case law. And based upon that, they issue specialty occupation RFs. You're going to see the surge in specialty occupation RFs in coming cases, basically, especially with the cap cases, because that's only the way I think USCIS can take a step. And second thing which I see is basically is that surge in the site visits, in the inquiries, because of the COVID-19, there are a lot of places where site visits have not occurred. Basically, even they've occurred, through the telecommute, basically by calls on the telephones or by emails or like that. But if the vaccinations are done, everything is done, and if the society starts opening up again, I think there's going to be a surge in the site visits also. It's important that employers ensure that they're in compliance with the regulations, with the especially the public access files, and also with the I-9 verifications also. It's very, very important that they are in compliance with those two things, basically. And I think it's very, very important to have those compliance procedures to be in place in the companies, and making sure that they go to that. These are the two things which I see that's going to be different from what it has been for the past 7-8 months, basically, because of the cap filings, which we are going to see now in the coming months.
Okay, I think it's time for the announcement. And if you need any specific legal advice or any legal immigration services, you can contact Bhanu Garu anytime, always. And so firm name uchesi BBI Law Group, phone number 7034967722, and email bhanu@bbailawgroup.com. Website uchesi www.bbailawgroup.com, and he's always ready to help you guys. So Bhanu Gani contact you definitely. So Bhanu Garu, let's talk about some RFE questions. So can a beneficiary directly respond to an RFP, or only can attorney do this?
It depends upon what kind of a case it is. I mean, if it's an H-1B petition, it's either employer or the employer's attorney only can respond to the RFEs. If it's a petition like H-1B, L-1, O-1, or something petitions like that, then employer or the employer's attorney can respond to the RFEs. If it's an individual application like a H-4 or F-1 or a B1, B2 like that, or L2, then the individual has an authority, because it's the individual who's actually filing those applications with the USCIS. So it's up to them whether they would like to respond on by themselves, or they would like to seek an help of an attorney to respond to the attorneys, basically. If they file their cases through an attorneys, then it's always a good idea to use the attorney services to respond to the RFPs also, because most of the attorneys don't charge separately for the RFP responses. They're included in their services. Basically, for example, in our law firm, we don't charge separately for the RFPs to respond when we take up a case, because we think it's part of the process of the case. So our fees include responding to any RFPs that have been issued in the cases, basically. So if you sought help from us filing your application, I would say you basically continue seeking our help in responding to your RFE as well. You can do it by yourself as an applicant, but I think it's a good idea to use the services of us, because you already paid for that. It's not that you did not pay for that, because and most of us, basically, we charge flat fee basis anyway for the immigration matters, and that means you already paid for it. So you should be able to utilize attorney services for that. And it's always a good idea to use the experts in responding to their RFEs. Basically.
Yes, definitely. That's a good idea. So what are the chances of approval after RFE, Bhanu Garu?
Very high, as long as you can meet the requirements, because the standard which you have to meet is very minimal, right? That's a preponderance of the evidence standard, which is a very minimal standard. So if you can provide information to the USCIS saying that it's very likely that what the beneficiary is seeking is true, or what he's telling is true, then the case has to be approved. I mean, it's very likely that cases will approve after the RFE, basically. One has to understand this. RFE is part of the process. Basically, you know that if you know that if any RFE is issued for you, that means USCIS is working on your case. That means they're reviewing your documents and they're trying to adjudicate your case, basically. It's a part of the process. And then they do not want to deny the case, or basically because there is some information which they like to seek the clarity or more information on that, so that they can approve the case for you. That's the reason why they're issuing an RFE. If you get an RFE, take it as a positive thing rather than as a negative thing. That's what I advise all those clients, because that means USA is working on your case. Once you respond to the RFE, that means you're going to get the decision fast on your case. Otherwise, you will not know exactly what's happening on your case for years and years and years, or a months and months and months, depending upon type of the case and the processing times of that case.
Yes, Bhanugar. We have another caller, Karan from Maryland. Karan,
Sure.
please go on.
Hello, Bhanugaru. This is Karan. So I have a couple of questions. Like you said about the RFE also, it's kind of concerning to that. So if the EAD is expired and the company puts you on unpaid LOA, does the company have to update their I-9 verification form to state that the employee is in, LOA status, or they just leave it as is? And when the EAD is approved, because it's in the pending status right now with USCIS, so when it's approved, do they only go into the system and then approve, update the status as like, okay, the EAD is approved, or do they do it prior to, when the LOA is actually starting?
Legally, they cannot say that it's an LOA to the agencies or to anybody, basically, because if you do not have a proper work authorization, then they have to terminate your employment. Okay, and therefore they have to follow the process and the procedures for the relieving an employee once your EAD is expired and you're waiting to get the EAD renewal to be approved for you, basically. And once the EAD renewal is approved, the process how they can get you on board is that they have to go through the rehiring process in the company, basically. Internally, you and your employer may call it as an LOA, leave of absence without pay, basically, for the duration. But in reality, it's basically relieving you and rehiring you again once you got an EAD, basically. So they have to go through the I-9 verification process again, which is an initial hiring I-9 process, not the re-verification hiring process, basically, over there, because they're rehiring you with a new effective start date. And that's very, very important. And employers must understand that, and they have to document I-9 accordingly.
Right. Thanks for calling. And Bhanugar, I think it's time to wind up the show. Thank you so much for spending a valuable time here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Prasanna Garu. And thank you, Sakshi TV. Thank you very much for always encouraging me and everything. I would like to tell everybody that today I got my second dose of vaccination. So I'm very happy to say that. But of course, I'm in weather because of that. And vaccinations do have a little bit of side effects, basically. And then, and that's what it is, basically. But I'm glad that I've done this. I'm going through this and everything. I would advise everybody to go ahead and get the vaccinations. Do not worry about what's going to happen if you take a vaccination, whether they'll work or not, and all those things. First, go and take a vaccination so you can protect yourself and protect your family. That's very, very important, basically. Okay. And thank you all, and especially Sakshi team. They've been always kind to me, and very, very thankful to them. And
thank you.
Yeah,
take care
you
of
all
yourself.
have a wonderful day.
And we'll see you on next week.
See you all next week, ma'am. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Right. ఇవాల్టి స్పెషల్ ఇమిగ్రేషన్ షో మరో షోతో నెక్స్ట్ ఎపిసోడ్ లో మళ్ళీ కలుద్దాం. కీప్ వాచింగ్ సాక్షి తెలుగు ప్రజల మనసాక్షి. నమస్తే.